Hi, everybody. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. Thanks for joining me on the Plant-Based Business Hour. Great to be back with you. Hope you're having a great summer. So, coronavirus has shown us that we have very fragile supply systems. We're talking about labor supply, material supply, and food supply. The global food supply system took a big hit during coronavirus, showing its lack of sturdiness. So, as we focus today's show, in the past, we've talked about China, India, of course, Europe, and America, the States. But today, we're turning the show to Africa. What is the food insecurity problem, if there is one, in Africa? And what about the growing African middle class? Specifically, today we'll talk about South Africa and how the food that will feed them in the future will be cultivated meat. That's why I want to bring on my guest today. Thanks for joining me, Tasneem, Karodia, and Absie Pantshwa of Mzansi. Oh gosh, hope I'm saying that right. Mzansi meat. Okay. Out of South Africa. So much to dive into. I want to get to know the two of you, but I also really want to wrap my mind around Africa. Of course, we can't talk about the whole continent today. You guys are specifically in South Africa, but I think what's going on in Africa is sort of a bellwether for the rest of the world. So before we get into all of this, first, let's find out a little bit about each of you. So Tasneem, you are the CFO of Mzansi Meat, and Absie, you are the head of PR. Let me ask you, each of you, starting with Absie, how long have you been with Mzansi Meat?
I actually have been with Mzansi since the inception, which was March 2020. And I mean, it is crazy, but we did start a business right in the beginning of the big pandemic. So I joined then, and I've been with them since.
Wow. So you've really ridden the wave of coronavirus, and I'm sure that's worked a number on the business plan, so to speak. Tasneem, how long have you been with the company?
I joined shortly after, so it's been over a year now, moving on to almost 18 months, I suppose. I started having early conversations with Brett and Jay in May last year, looking for a career change. I was previously in management consulting and, developed a passion for food and food systems and started looking at plant-based and cultivated meat and really wanted to move into that space. And my only options were in Europe or US and anywhere else but Africa. But it was very lucky and very fortuitous that I'd happened to find Mzansi Meat on the GFI webinar and kind of got in touch and been with the team ever since.
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating. It's one of the things that we'll talk about today is the vegan culture, plant-based culture, cultivated meat culture. What is that becoming on the African continent, specifically South Africa? Okay, well, let's talk about Mzansi Meat. We'll just give an overview for people, then we can dive into all of these topics. So Mzansi Meat, tell me exactly, Tasneem, what it does.
Amazing. So we're Africa's first cultivated meat company. Started, as Absie mentioned, March 2020. We're in early stages of R&D. We're working on bovines, so we hope to be the first company in Africa to bring a cultivated beef burger to the continent.
Wonderful. And let me just clarify there. Did you say that you're working on replacing fetal bovine serum? Is that what you said?
No, on bovines. So we're doing cultivated beef.
I see. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Sorry for that. Of course. And Absie, perhaps you could tell me, I think it's a particular kind of beef that's either particular to South Africa or to the continent. Can you explain?
Well, we're going to be exploring different cattle breeds, so to speak. So one quite popular in South Africa is the Nguni cattle. Also got our eye on the Ankole cattle, which is it's more West Africa and Central Africa. But we've got a lot of breeders that are here in South Africa as well with the Ankole cattle. But generally, we've got a lot of Nguni cattle in South Africa that we're going to be working a lot with.
And for those of us who aren't familiar with African cattle, how is it different than, let's say, American cattle?
Well, it's not really. It's just a matter of like where. I think it's just regional. So it's not so like there. I mean, in America, what you call the dairy cow. So we've also got the dairy cow here, but what let's say in Argentina, what they would have as the beef, like the cattle that they breed for specifically beef farming, that would be what we call Nguni. It's just like a regional difference.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just going to add, one of the things that I think a lot of people have said about South African meat in general is the good quality of the meat. And a lot of that also has to do with the types of breeds that we have here, having not being necessarily bred specifically in a certain way. We still got a lot of indigenous cows here that are being bred.
And those indigenous cows, do they taste differently, or it's a look that's different, or?
They do. I mean, so I come from so my dad, well, actually, like extended family. So I come from a family of cattle farmers. So they do taste quite different. So there's regions, and also in South Africa we've got provinces, which is regions. So I come from the Eastern Cape, which is the southeast. And right now we're in the Western Cape, which is where Cape Town is, which I think a lot of people are quite familiar with. So, and the cows do taste different, obviously, because of what they eat, in the different regions. So, and also it depends on how they bred. So there's a big movement when it comes to ethically grown, which is great, and then it's been happening for the past few years. So everybody kind of like knows where their meat comes from, and the meat does taste different from where you've got feedlots, like what in America is referred to quite a lot as feedlots, but in South Africa, yeah. So you've got commercial farming, and then you've got sustainable farming. So yeah, the beef definitely tastes different.
Okay, so I know cattle ranchers make that argument here also in the States, and I think a lot of people think that that's a system that can work for them. But then we know the more sustainable, so let's say the better for the animal, the more they get to roam free, et cetera, the more land they need, and the less likely we are to feed 10 billion people, which according to the UN, we will be 10 billion people by 2050, as we are now currently 7.7 billion, and we're going to grow by about 25%. So that then begs the question for why we would want a different, in addition to animal welfare, why we would want a different system for delivering people meat. Let me ask you, because you are the first cultivated meat company in the entire continent of Africa, what is driving the decision to make cultivated meat? And we'll talk about how that's done in a second. We've gone deep dives on this show into cultivated meat. So if you're really looking for the science of that, please refer back to previous episodes. Today, we're really talking about more Africa and how the food supply system is changing in Africa. But so for Mzansi meat to have cultivated meat, what's the driving factor? Is it getting more people nutritious food? Is it the environment? Is it animal welfare? Tasneem?
It's across the board. I think we're seeing this not just in South Africa, but across Africa. There is more of a drive towards veganism, plant-based, and it's for all of those reasons. There's recently been a study done with North Mountain Consulting looking at early adopters for cultivated meat, specifically in South Africa, and it was a representative sample. And most people are citing health, environment, animal welfare across the board. And so people are seeing all three as important. I mean, again, people are vegan for different reasons. So in South Africa, people are also going to make that choice for a different reason. But it seems to all three come out quite on par with one another, let me rather say.
Really? It's divided equally?
Well, they're all very high. Environment's coming out probably, if you look at all of them individually, environment is probably the highest for that study that was run. But most people are thinking about it, which is very exciting, I think, for us.
It is very exciting. I have to say, I thought you might say the opposite. I thought you might say that people hadn't really started thinking about it yet, but that you were hoping to be out in front and that you realize the food supply chain difficulties, and that as you try to feed a growing continent, and we will talk about that growing African middle class, that you see this as an obvious business and societal solution, but you're also saying there's consumer demand. And I think you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, that people aren't afraid of cultivated meat. So you're not getting any, Absie, maybe you can answer this, you're not getting any cultural pushback about like, hey, this is our meat and what are you doing with it?
Well, I mean, like when it comes to culture, it also goes into how we as Africans, and I'm going to specifically talk about South Africans, how we use or like what we, because one of the points that was raised recently is how do we view animals, in South Africa. So it depends on which side of the coin you fall onto. So like for me, it is, and I'm also in the restaurant industry, right? Which is also like pushing the nose to tail approach. So like it's very ethical, as Tasneem said, but there's a big drive when it comes to how people know now where their food comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And so so the ethical reasons behind our business is definitely one of the biggest. And when it comes to like actual cultivated meat, people will get used to the idea. They just need to understand how it happens, the process. But there's been a very big interest, and I mean we've been doing a lot of media in the past couple of months. Huge interest coming in from there, and I mean there's conversations we're having with beef farmers, because the samples, the biopsies, we're going to be working with the beef farmers. Everyone's kicking out the idea just as yet. So I'm very glad to see the positivity in that side.
I have to say, first of all, I'm glad that your audio is back. We were having a little bit of connectivity there with you, so I can hear you a lot clearer now. So it's great. I have to say, your answer makes me almost weepy, because when I see the business synergy of this kind of perfect solution for a planet in crisis and a growing middle class and a growing population that's going to need food with less resources, less water, less land, etc., and I see a population that is not afraid to make change for the better for themselves, their neighbors, the planet, animals, I couldn't ask for more. I mean, it's dreamy. Here in the United States, we are starting to see the same kind of studies. Actually, I think the studies are coming out of the UK that are saying people, and I'm going to put this in my show notes, I'm going to quote this probably within 1% of accuracy. People are saying that they anticipate when cellular meat comes out that 40% of their grocery store basket will be from cultivated meat for the meat purchases. That they can be so quick to say, I get it. Actually, cultivated meat is the next innovation for animal agriculture. Because the problem with animal agriculture is that it is so resource intensive. It doesn't make a good business equation. But if you can make it resource efficient, and that's what cellular meat does, you still get the meat, you still get what you're looking for, but now you've got an equation that works. It's exciting. Okay, so when you are making your production, which by the way, when will you be in market?
We're still 2 to 3 years away from getting into the market. I think we do want to start having early samples next year, probably towards the end of the year. But before we're in food service and retail, it will still be another 2 to 3 years.
Okay, 2 to 3 years you're thinking. And when you're looking at production, are you thinking for South Africa or you're thinking for the entire continent?
I mean, we're an African team, and I mean, one of the main reasons we did start this is the issue of food security, and is thinking about all the issues that exist across the continent. We're in South Africa, and I think you've got to start somewhere. So we're definitely planning to start in South Africa, but we do want to expand across Africa. But that would mean different things. I think across Africa, there's different concerns, and the food security becomes a bigger issue the further you go outside of South Africa. And so a main thing for us is to really think about nutrition and getting protein to people, and what would that look like. It may look different in South Africa. There's maybe a market for burgers, but that doesn't mean that's the same product that we go to market in for the rest of Africa in. It definitely doesn't mean we're going with burgers to the rest of Africa, let me rather say.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because when you say cultivated meat to me, which by the way, a quick gross overstatement here, because again, we're not getting into the deep science today, but generally speaking, you are taking cells either from a data lab or from a piece of hair or off of an animal in a sanctuary. So no harm there. You're taking these cells, you're putting them in a dish where they can feed on a certain medium. When they get large enough, you move them to a structure that they can grab onto, and the house begins to be built, and it starts to grow along this structure. Again, adding more nutrients for it to feed on, and perhaps even spices. I'm not sure at that point. I'm not sure if there's any flavoring or if it's just straight. The cells are doing their own business of growing, and then you have meat. So in my mind, I imagined structured whole cuts of meat, but you're talking about grounds.
I mean, we don't have to go into too much of the specifics on the technical side, but we're working on what would typically look like ground meat products. And I think one of the main reasons is we're still early phases of our R&D. And from a tech perspective, it is easier to grow sort of flat cells, grow in a flat structure. And so to be able to layer them without needing a lot of the scaffolds or structuring and texturing to get to the market earlier, we would look at a more simplistic product. And definitely when the tech catches up, we would aim for 3D structured meat steaks and the like.
Mm-hmm. One more quasi-tech question before I get to Absie. And currently you're using fetal bovine serum. Is that the medium that's helping it grow?
Yes, we are using FBS. I mean, one of the main things, and I think criticisms across the board, is really how quickly can everyone remove it. And we are in conversations. I think we're very lucky. There are a lot of players now in the system, a lot of B2B players that are focusing specifically on certain aspects of the process. And so we are testing serums that are FBS free. And we do hope by the time we get to market to be serum free for sure.
Yes, I've interviewed so many cultivated meats producers, and they all say the same thing. We've got fetal bovine serum now, but no one's going to go to market with fetal bovine serum. Everyone says that. Absie, let's talk a little bit more about who this is for. So we talk about South Africa first, and then perhaps the rest of the continent, and the rest of the continent getting different products. But let's talk specifically about the demographic. Of course, in the beginning, it's going to be expensive. Obviously, you haven't scaled yet. That's like any business. Everybody settle down. It's nothing special to cultivated meat. Once you get scale and the price comes down, who do you see eating this?
So, I mean, like when it comes to the study that we did recently, so the most of our early adopters are young, and it's young Black. Yeah, it's like they're 28 years old. Hey, Tasneem. Yeah, so between the ages of 28 and 32. So because they're quite inquisitive, and they will pretty much try anything that is very good, for the environment because they're quite concerned about that. But generally, like when it comes to the food security issue, we would be targeting homes that do have a food security problem. And when it comes to like the kind of meat that we're going for first, which is ground meat, it's more accessible. So like you'll see, I mean, there's also like soy mince, which is just a term of it. So soy mince is quite popular and has been for a number of years. Like I grew up having some of it as well from time to time. So like mince is an easy, accessible kind of protein or meat. Let me not say protein because there's obviously all the plant-based proteins, but it's easier to prepare and to move. So that's who would be targeting, because we do have a large problem of child-headed homes generally in Africa, and quite a lot in South Africa. So when it comes to feeding the household, we need to make things quite easy. And so the ground beef will definitely be for that. But also, like there's the middle class that we touched on, which is quite interested and wanting to save the environment. So we'll definitely be targeting them as well. But definitely targeting the food security problem.
So much to unpack there. I'm going to start with child-headed homes. What are you saying there?
Oh, so that's more of a political conversation, but I do obviously know more about it, because so child-headed homes, the AIDS pandemic. So because of like AIDS and HIV and all sorts of other diseases, I mean, like, there's parts of the Eastern Cape where there was a lot of TB. So with a lot of parents were affected. So there's, I mean, like I grew up, we had a neighbor, and she was 2 years older than me, but then she was taking care of her 3 brothers and sisters. And because her parents died, and then she just happened to be responsible for them. So there's a lot of that happening, and there has been. I mean, like I won't even touch into the rest of the continent, but this is like what is neighboring to us. there's quite a number of child-headed homes, which is something that the government is trying to tackle as well.
I see. Thanks for explaining that. Okay, so that's probably its own topic for another show, but I think very fascinating. But I guess what it would boil down to for our conversation is that cooking has to be fast and easy. Very much like here in the States, no one has time. No one cooks like they used to. They did for a little bit during coronavirus, and then they kind of got back to not cooking again. So it has to be easy. It has to be something that people readily understand and cannot spend too much time on. And of course, ground meats answer that. So I understand as you address food insecurity, and we're going to get to the wealthy and the growing middle class in just a second, but how badly was South Africa hit by food insecurity during coronavirus, and how much of the mission is to change the food supply system in Africa so that you have less food insecurity? Maybe Tasneem, because I'm still breaking up your audio a little bit, to Absie.
I'll get going. I think, so look, yeah, okay. Sorry, I thought Absie was saying something. I think food security is a big issue across the continent. I think in South Africa, we're quite lucky in certain ways that a lot of food is produced here, where we export a lot of food out of the country. And so in terms of when COVID was at its peak and there wasn't much imports coming in, South Africa was still able to have a lot of food. Now, that being said, I think there's a question of demographics and wealth and how much of that was accessible by all, and that's a different part of the conversation. But South Africa as a whole, being a net exporter, does have access to food. One of the other things related, and I think which is an important part, is we're also a very water-stressed country. And so when we speak about cultivated meat from a sustainability perspective, this hopefully can help before there is an issue and we have more of a food insecurity issue as we go, which is, I think, a very important thing. A lot of it is also future looking. How do we make sure that the resources we do have can be maintained in South Africa? In terms of the rest of the continent, I think it varies as well. There are droughts and there's all kinds of things. And I think across the continent, there are different kinds of issues and there's less access to protein as you go in different countries. I think that's one of the issues for us that we would like to address as we go. In South Africa, it's how do we maintain all the resources we have? But externally, how do we also take the resources that we have and help make sure that other people have access to nutritious protein? Because I think that is the one thing that's potentially missing across the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Well said. It's forward looking, and I'm happy to see, because of course the other continents are all looking at this in various degrees, but I'm happy to see that Africa as well is getting the environmental message and realizing, and of course it would be, I don't know, I'm not saying it wouldn't be, but I'm just glad to hear that environmentalism and resources is top of mind for Africa as well. And it would make sense that you are a water challenged continent. So I can see that. Absie, I think you've taken off your earbuds, which is good. Let's see if your audio is a little better for us now. Okay, we'll see. I'm going to ask you a question about the growing middle class. So I think I saw a study recently from the African Bank that says 1/3 of Africa, now we're talking about the continent, not just the country of South Africa, but 1/3 of the African population is now considered middle class because there's more job security. There's people are leaving farmer positions and agricultural positions and they're moving into 9 to 5 or, working for someone with a stable paycheck. Do you anticipate that the middle class will gravitate towards these novel innovations in food, or are they resistant because they've worked so long to get to the middle class that they feel that meat is part of a status symbol for them?
Well, I mean, there's two parts to that question, because so the middle class is definitely gravitating more towards these innovations. So like if you look, there's a big retailer here in South Africa, Woolworths. So Woolworths Food, which is, so like it's a fancier retail store, food retail, and they've in the past 2 years they've brought in a lot of plant-based products. And I mean, obviously there's a big demand, and there's the other chain stores, and I mean, like, there's too many of them to mention. But when it comes to dietaries and what consumers actually want, there's definitely the innovation is there, and we are very interested in it. Like, I mean, everyone's tried, most everyone I know now has tried plant-based, even though they very much meat eaters. So they'll definitely be trying that out, because I mean, when you can afford it, you will, and why not? Because like there's not an ethical reason why you wouldn't try all these innovations. And
Yeah.
then now and all, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes I think like America's slow on the uptake. We always think that we're ahead and we're doing everything, but we've had some resistance to accepting these things here. And then I interview around the world, China, India, Africa, and I see that people are excited about innovation, and that carries its own status. David Young, you may or may not know him. He's the founder of Omnipork and Green Monday and Green Common, and he always says, we have to outcool meat and dairy. And I think that younger generation, as they look towards tech and innovation and a brighter future, they're all about adapting. And it's just very exciting to hear you say these words, that people are interested in trying it as well. And so it could be a status symbol as well, maybe, to be able to try these things, just like having meat used to be a status symbol. Absie, do you see that as possible?
Yes, no, definitely. So it is definitely, it would be a status symbol, because and also like when it comes to us serving, when we are ready to go into market, we're gonna start in restaurants, because like every food trend gets brought in by chefs. So I myself owning a restaurant, we will try it at my restaurant, and then going into different and so it is a status symbol. But there's also, like, because of the cultural side of things when it comes to meat in general, like in the country and on the continent as well, people will still consume meat at that level. But for daily consumption, cultivated meat will definitely be forming a big part of their groceries.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Tasneem, do you see that there are conversations around the democratization of meat? So one of the benefits of cultivated meat is, if it's very hard to get a rare cut of meat like filet mignon, not the case when it's cultivated meat. Right now it's filet mignon for everybody. Is that conversation coming into the zeitgeist at all?
I think not yet. I think one of the things, we're still in early stages of people understanding the plant-based world, despite consumers being interested, and they are interested. I mean, we look at studies, we look anecdotally, we look at what we're seeing in grocery stores. It's there and there's demand. But I think we're still not at the stage where we have as much variety as the US, for example. We have Beyond Meat, but we don't have many other options in that category. We get Oatly now, but we don't have, again, that we actually milk alternatives. There are probably quite a few of them, but in terms of the other things, not so much. And so the categories that we can choose from are still limited, and so it does have more of an exclusivity element to it, as you were saying. But I think we will still get there, because cultivated meat is still only something people are learning about and excited about, but haven't seen. Until you can try it, I don't think that conversation about it being democratized is yet a conversation that people are having just yet.
Okay, I get that. Absie, I'm wondering, or maybe both of you can share generally how animals are viewed in South Africa. Is there the animal welfare question coming up? We talked about it a little bit before, but because there's also still big game hunting, it's just hard for me to wrap my mind around this. Absie, what's the animal welfare situation like in South Africa?
On my end, so like animals they're quite sacred, and they very, very highly valued in our culture, and I'm speaking to you from like Nguni culture. I'm specifically Xhosa. So like with that, like because of the high value of them, it's like, just to give you an example, so let's say my father's got like 100 cows. So but it's going to be for him, it's a difficult position, just to when it comes to now selling off his cattle, selling off his cattle to abattoirs and the likes. And also because it's a small farmer and he is considered a small farmer, abattoirs aren't really open to that. They want cattle from commercial farmers, right? So there's that conversation about how, and like when it comes to cattle, that's how they viewed. I mean, then there's goats. Goats are treated in most of our cultures as for traditional ceremonies. So like in a lot of the Zulu culture, you'll find in traditional ceremonies, if you're coming of age, you'll have like people will wear like a piece of skin of goat skin as like a bracelet for a couple of months, or depending on that ceremony, what it was about. And there's also now the animal skin like cloths, which are traditional in hierarchy. Like it depends on the hierarchies. There's a lot of it in the Zulu nation. So animals are viewed very differently, like across all 11 different it's not, I wouldn't call it cultures, but like all the different the 11 different demographics that we have in the country. Now when it comes to game farming and like hunting, Tasneem, do you want to just come in on that, like how?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we do have quite a big safari kind of culture where a lot of people come and view animals. We have a lot of wildlife and there's a lot of respect given to those animals. And so I think the way, South Africans view animals, I think does depend on the species. And I think this is kind of what you see globally. There's a speciesism to this conversation. And so rhinos are sacred. And I think everyone in South Africa would, everyone has probably donated to a Save the Rhino campaign in South Africa. So I think it varies when you talk about what species. And yes, there's still a lot of, wild game hunting, but probably not to the level that, industrial agricultural farming takes place. And so the view is probably quite similar to what you would have anywhere else in the world in terms of which species do we place more value on. In terms of what that means for cultivated meat, there are companies working on game meat. And so can they, venison is quite popular in Europe and I'm not sure if it's as popular in the US, but so that's game meat here. And there's a company that's trying to work on cultivated game meat and to see if they can also remove that from the system as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking that cultivated meat could put pressure on big game hunting. Perhaps I'm just being idealistic because I really would like to see that happen. Personally, my own view is I just love to value all animals equally because they all have, personalities, and I see them all, even in the smallest chickens. I see their personalities and their communication structures and their family organizations. Chickens can remember up to 100 faces. I don't know a lot of humans who can remember up to 100 faces. So, so I'd love, and I do think we will see it. I think we'll see cultivated materials. I think, we're starting with hamburger meat, but it's going to go so much further than that, including maybe. Now, no one eats lion, to my knowledge. Most people don't around the world. Certainly, it's not factory farmed in any way, shape, or form. But now you might have more options than you ever had before, just in the same way that it can be filet mignon for everyone. It can be these unique types of meats that people can try and have lots of choices that they never had before. So I'm wondering if you think cultivated meat will put any pressure on big game hunting because people won't be eating any of that. I don't know. I don't even know that people eat what they catch.
It's a very good question. And I think some of the game hunting that happens, whether it's lions, not necessarily for their meat to consume. So I do think it becomes a question as to why some of that hunting is happening. When we're talking about things like venison, that kind of hunting, if there's cultivated meat, that would displace the need for that type of hunting. Some of the others, I think as we grow as a society, we see, not wanting to cause harm. We're in a position not to cause that harm. And so I think there's less prestige in hunting down a lion than there was. But I think that's just a consequence of a lot of the way the world is moving and how we view animals as a whole, which I think cultivated meat, in its form now is causing everyone to reflect on any animal. How do we view every animal? And so I think it's more a consequence of everything we do now and how society views it will kind of filter through to every species in some way.
Yeah, it just goes to show the power of food. Since food is something we do 3 times a day, it touches all of our lives in so many ways: our jobs, our legacy to our kids, our nutrition, of course, and how we survive, our planet and how we use it, our relationship to each other, our relationship to the planet, our relationship to animals. It's just so fascinating. What we wear, it's, even down to like the tires on our car, this kind of thing. I think it's fascinating to live in a time, and I think we will see it in our lifetimes. I lived through, I typed on a typewriter in high school. I don't know. Do you guys have a typewriter? I don't know anybody with a typewriter. I used to dial my girlfriends on like a pink rotary phone. So I'm dating myself, but I think we probably all have cell phones at this point. I think it's going to be like that in 30 years. There'll still be meat. Don't get me wrong. In my lifetime, I don't know that meat will be gone from the plate as we currently know it, but it will no longer be the majority in the way that we know it. Meat will still be the majority thing that we eat, but not in the way we eat it today. So very fascinating. Switching gears just a little bit. So you guys are on the edge of technology and innovation. Are you having to pull people from all over Africa who have the education, or is South Africa booming with scientists who want to work on this? I'll give it to Absie and hope that her audio is okay.
Is my audio better?
It comes in and comes out, so I got you now.
That's straight. Okay, great. I mean, like right now, when it comes to the people that we've got working for Mzansi, it is South Africans. But we are looking far and wide, into the continent, because there's plenty of talent, and it also just helps that where we are based, there's also the top universities and research centers, which is in Cape Town, and also one of our founders is currently in Johannesburg. So there's plenty of talent here on the continent, but all of our staff currently is coming from South Africa, and we're getting consultations from outside of the country, like from the US, but generally we are here. There's plenty of talent here.
It's beautiful. And how big is Mzansi Meat in terms of people working there?
We're 7 people. Oh, I got it. See, we're 7 people, predominantly on the R&D side. So we're very small, but as Absie mentioned, a few of the advisors that we have are, they're not obviously counted in the 7 and are international, and as far as the like broad expertise, which is what we obviously need, but we're still able to be quite small in this early phase. We are going to hire, and we will be hiring, definitely more on the R&D side, but still small.
Keep us posted. What does this do to or for the African farmer? I think what farmers are, I'm guessing here, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, farmers in Africa are probably experiencing what farmers in the United States are feeling, in that the kids don't want to do it. So farmers have children, and then the children say, well, I'd really rather go work at Cultivated Meats, or I'd rather work in computer science, or I'd rather work in filmmaking, et cetera. So you're not seeing the interest in the next generation of kind of carrying this torch. And then when you shift, because food touches our lives in so many ways, when you shift the food, you have to shift everything else in the supply system. So you have to shift how you farm. You also have to shift how you bank. So I just say that to just show how vast the reach of the food supply system is. So if we used to mandate that lots of chemicals be used because that's how we had a bumper crop and that's how the bank made back their money, now we're thinking, well, those chemicals really hurt us, so the bank's going to have to ease up on those restrictions. So it's everyone in the entire system has to be working towards the same goal, and you're seeing it throughout the supply system. So I'm just wondering how the farmer works into this equation, if at all. Absie?
Well, I mean, with the farmers, yes, there is that generational gap. So let's say, with my dad, I'll just keep referencing because it's a very close example. So with him, because my older brother, yes, he was also into farming, but then the younger kids, then we weren't that interested because we wanted to go to Joburg, and Cape Town and go have office jobs and the likes. But now the younger generation that's coming up, other people in the family that are now, I'd say in their late 20s, they're going back into the farming space because they've seen the gap. So, and now because they're also like quite environmentally conscious, so they've seen the gap and they see how to fix the problem. So they're slowly going back into farming. So it's actually quite wonderful. I mean, I was traveling into the Eastern Cape last week, and I saw, I mean, and last year as well, I saw quite a bit of this interest of the younger generation, and they're coming with better solutions for the environment. So they're not just pushing commercially, but the first point that they facing is how is this good for the environment, and then let's make money, which is actually quite a great shift. And I mean, I saw this also, like I was part of the organizing team for the African Green Revolution Forum, which is a conference that happened annually across the continent. And this topic was raised about the younger generation. Also, you'll see a lot of women in farming. There's an organization, it's called Farmers in Heels, here in South Africa, which is doing quite well. And it's growing like into the continent. So there's the farming. This is good for farmers, and the conversations, I've had very little conversations with some of the farmers currently, but we are also in a publication that's coming out, our Farmers Weekly, that's coming out this week. So we're going to see what the reaction is to that, and we'll be having a lot of conversations with big commercial farmers.
I think this is a fascinating topic. I recently spoke at the UN Global Compact Leaders Summit, and we were talking about farmers in Africa and what are the more sustainable options, and in addition to their livelihood, et cetera. Absie, I'm going to connect you to my friend at the UN Global Compact Leaders Summit. Do you know what that is? If you don't, just for anybody who doesn't know what it is, a lot of people probably don't. It's one of, the UN has so many of its offshoots. It is one of the offshoots under the UN with the directives of following the sustainable guidelines. The UN Global Compact focuses on small and medium-sized businesses and how those businesses can also incorporate the goals, the climate goals and sustainability goals of the UN. So I think you guys squarely fit in the small business category at this point. So I will be sure to introduce you after this call. Okay, Tasneem, throwing it to you as we kind of wrap up here. So Absie was talking about, there's a new generation and they've got their sights on something new. I used to ask this question. I used to say 10 years, but now things are changing so quickly. Then it became 5 years. Now it's going to be 3 years. Can you make your predictions for South Africa in particular, but Africa as a whole? Where is it going in the next 3 years in terms of veganism, plant-based, cultivated meat?
Really growing. I think, as our predictions is probably 2 to 3 years before cultivated meat is in the market. But the first product that goes to market will be a blended plant-based product, which I think you'll see globally as well. I think we're seeing the trend with veganism and plant-based growing. We will see that continue to grow. In 3 years' time, obviously a short space of time, it will still not be the predominant, protein consumed, but we will see it grow, and we will see most people probably eating at least 1 to 2 meals in that space. I think Africa and South Africa in particular, most people don't regard meals if they don't have meat or conventional meat on their plates. But I think that shift is changing. Absie's quite an avid meat eater. And I think that shift is changing as products have evolved and adapted to be more like for like, almost a non-choice anymore. You can have everything that you want, and it's better for the environment, for animals, and for yourself.
Yes, and as the taste gets better and the price comes down, it's just, why would you? I was saying to somebody the other day, again, dating myself, I used to live in Paris, and I would fly back and forth, United States, Paris. I would walk into the plane and people would be smoking. Can you imagine if you walked into an airplane and people were smoking? They'd take you out and they'd call security. I think it's going to be like that with meat. The people are going to say like, hey, you can't use our water like this. It's our air, it's our land, it's our water, it's our animals, it's our resources too. I don't know. We're going to see. We live in interesting times. Okay, so we wrap up here. I've got some exit questions for both of you. These are meant to be really short, off-the-cuff answers. I'll start with Absie. What do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
Oh, okay. Firstly, COVID. Someone could have given us a warning.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I
Yeah.
think some scientists were talking about it, but boy, nobody was listening.
No, nobody was listening at all.
Yeah.
And it's just like the innovation, just watching the innovation when it comes to plant-based, um, the plant-based proteins and everything that's coming out. Like I'd never, I've never imagined it. And I made a joke, and I think Tasneem was there as well. Like my father met his first vegetarian, he calls it, about 8 years ago only, but also because we do come from a very small town, so like he'd never so explaining cultivated meat to him has been quite interesting. And yeah, so like so what I definitely wish we knew is the impact that all of the wrong ways of farming, that the impact that it would have had on the environment now. But it's also, I mean, like it's a good thing because it's pushed us forward quite quickly when it comes to us coming up with solutions that can change the impact on the environment that we've had in the past few years.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing when we all set our mind to change. It actually happens pretty quickly. Tasneem, what do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
And so it's 2020, I suppose the one thing is like, I think everything's a learning opportunity. And I think, we take for granted failure and things that go wrong, but there's a lot that we can all do and learn and grow from. And I think it's just important to keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Okay, back to Absie. Quick one-word answers. You're having a bad day. Things aren't going your way. Is there a phrase that you tell yourself to get yourself back in the groove?
Oh, it's all in a day's work.
I love that. All in a day's work. I like to say nose to the grindstone, eyes to the sky. Tasneem, what you got for me? You're having a bad day. What is your go-to phrase? You got this. You got this. Giving yourself that pep talk. I love that. Okay, you're super busy because everybody wants you and the work that you do, and you're both so badass, which is great. So you're so busy you had no time for lunch. Absie, what's your go-to snack?
Oh, okay. It's biltong. What we call so it's biltong, which is cured and then dried meat.
Dear Lord.
What's it called in the States, Taz?
Jerky.
Jerky.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I am getting you some plant-based jerky. Just hold on to your bootstraps. That is coming your way. I'm introducing you to the UN Global UN Global Compact folks, and I'm getting you plant-based jerky. Tasneem, you have the last word. What is your go-to snack?
It's these peanut butter filled pretzels. I am obsessed at the moment, and they're delicious. And obviously, peanut butter. How can you go wrong?
Wait, what is it again? It's a pretzel?
It's a peanut butter filled pretzel.
Oh, well, everybody loves that. Yes, of course. A peanut butter filled pretzel. We leave today's show on peanut butter and pretzels and cultivated meat. Both of you, Tasneem and Absie, I want to thank you for being with me. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for the knowledge drop that you've given today. We will all have our eye on Africa, which I believe is going to be one of the leaders actually in moving the food system forward as that middle class grows. We're all going to keep our eye on Africa. Thank you all for all you do. You too, stay put. Everybody else on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and where else am I? I'm everywhere. Thank you for being here. I will see you all next week. And Tasneem and Absie, don't